I almost want to talk about like the misconceptions of authenticity, that like you don't have to show everything. Like you can be authentic without showing everything, especially if you're building a personal brand.
Welcome to Rome Howl, an ongoing conversation around a more authentic and intuitive way of marketing and business, where we dig into the trends and new ways of thinking that are taking hold in the digital marketing space and explore how to leverage technology to create work we love in the 21st century. I'm your host, Jennifer Gardner, a writer, speaker, lawyer, hardworking, lazy person who loves art and business, nature and technology, the adventure of doing all the things and making money along the way. My passion is supporting you in creating magnetic marketing content that attracts new clients and customers and building the systems you need to automate your business growth so that growing and even doing your business feels expansive, easier, and more fulfilling than the old school, nose to the grindstone way things used to be. There's a new paradigm of business, marketing, and messaging that's more intuitive, where we show up authentically as our multidimensional selves and connect deeply with those we are here to serve. I'm going to share how you can do that, strategies I use and experiment with in my own business, tips for staying creative and visible without burning yourself out, and have conversations with online creators, trailblazers, and other business owners about their approach to creating work they love. Join me on my journey as I go down all the rabbit holes of the shiny, seductive world of online business, bust the myths wide open, and show you an evolved, ethical, heartfelt, and no BS sustainable approach to content creation and marketing online. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hilary's expertise is working with brands to grow their business through strategic storytelling. She also works with female business owners to define or redefine their brand identity. All of her links and information so that you can reach her will be on the website at romehowell.com in the show notes. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did having it. Let's go. Hello, Hilary.
Hello, Jennifer.
Welcome to Rome Howl 2.0.
I'm so happy to be here.
You're my first interview for 2.0.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an honor. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is a lot of pressure too. Oh, no.
I think... Oh, no, I didn't say that just because I want you to feel pressure. If anything, I should feel pressure because it's like my first interview since starting the new version of the podcast. And I'm really excited to be speaking to you because you and your work are so aligned with the mission of this new and improved 2.0 upgraded version of the podcast. So I'm really excited to have you as a guest and have this conversation.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I have loved connecting with you. I definitely feel the alignment between us. It's really always amazing when that just, there's such a natural ease between, our new friendship, our budding friendship. And hopefully this interview will, set a high bar for your future guests this season.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'll tell them not to listen to this lest they feel like completely freaked out and pressured about their performance, performance anxiety. I just won't tell them to listen to this conversation. But the thing that's so cool about how we met is we met on social media. We met on Instagram.
We did, which is increasingly something that's been happening. And I would say it's one of the bright lights of social media. I think there's obviously a lot of negatives to social media, but getting to meet people that I wouldn't otherwise have the ability to meet, in real life and really getting to connect with them on a deeper level has been a real treasure, I have to say.
Right. And it's just amazing the power of social media to connect us, not just to an audience, but to actual humans that we can build relationships with, which is the whole point. And you and I are like a perfect case of that.
True. I think before we started rolling, I believe I called you the West Coast me. So it's very nice to really, like-minded folks, but also not like-minded folks. And just, I've met a lot of really talented people on there. I've gone on to have, relationships where I can refer clients to new Instagram friends. And yeah, it's always such a pleasant surprise to meet good people on that platform. It's really refreshing.
I know it is. And it's funny that it's a surprise that you use the word surprise, because I bet that there's a lot of people out there who think, oh, social media is just superficiality and I don't want to spend my time there. I don't relate. And I think that this is a perfect example of how it is possible to have an actual relationship with another human that is beyond superficiality, because you and I connected over a really important issue. Well, we connected over a few, but one of them is the topic that we're going to be discussing today, which is the importance of building an authentic brand when you are a personal brand or a small business, or you're the face of your business, and like what it means to do that.
Even for corporations, honestly, it's important everywhere. And yes, you're right. And I have to say, though, I did use the word surprise, but I think I should say that I'm drawn to people who radiate this sense of authenticity, so much so that you can feel it through the screen, and then when we chat on the phone, who they are in real life also comes through. There's a real consistency there in how they're portraying themselves and how they are in real life. And that's where the authenticity piece comes in. And I think even on, if it's not a personal brand, you're building a business, it's really the whole point of a brand and a business and growing your business is how can you create connections with people? And just like in real life, are you drawn to the person who's like lying to you and talking behind your back, or feels like they're a different person with different groups of friends? Or are you drawn to the people who are honest and open and, put it all out there in a way that feels really good and comfortable? And I think for most people, the answer would be the latter. And it's the same with brands. The more I work with brands, the more I realize how many of the golden rules of branding apply to building a good life also, like being authentic, building a community, being a good listener. I mean, all of these things really translate to, knowing your audience. That's a big one. But they all translate, they can all be personal pieces of advice. So I think it's the one, I can't say it enough. I think it's the one thing that every brand, if you can figure out what it is about yourself and your business that makes you unique, that makes you you, and that could be a collective you as a business, you figure out how to leverage that and find your people in the marketplace, and you will, 9 times out of 10 beat your competition every time, because your audience is drawn to who you uniquely are.
I completely agree with everything you just said. And before we get deeper in the weeds of this conversation, can you please tell our listeners who you are, a little about yourself, and what it is you do?
Oh, yes. We forgot that part. Yes.
Well, yeah, we did.
Oh, yeah. So I am Hilary Young, and I run Hilary Young Creative, which is a brand strategy and content strategy consultancy. And really what that means is I help brands find their authentic voice, tell stories through that voice, and make deeper, more meaningful connections with the right audience to help grow their business.
I love that. I mean, you and I, we are like we said earlier, we're like little peas in a pod, because
We are.
I have Rome Howell Creative and I do pretty much the same thing as you. And it's just so fascinating to me, that you're all the way on the other side of the country doing very similar work.
Yeah. And we came to the work in such different ways, which I also think is very interesting.
Yeah.
But that's also, again, what makes us unique. Like my background and my experience is part of what draws my client base to me, and vice versa. Your unique background and experience, your experience as a lawyer, all of it makes you, I don't know. I mean, there's probably a little bit of crossover between our audiences, but I do think we cater to different people, and it's very interesting. But it goes to show, like there's plenty of room out there for competition, and it again all comes down to understanding who you are and understanding who you're talking to, knowing your audience, and what you're what value you're bringing to their life.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you just said about how we're both different but doing similar work, and how we have different backgrounds but doing similar work. I mean, one of the things that I've been super busy doing is taking this knowledge that I've acquired through different types of experience, my experience in the acting world, my experience as a trial lawyer, my experience in the marketing world, and sort of extracting the larger themes. And I find that people who excel in each one of these areas all work with the same material. They're all working with story, authenticity, vulnerability, communicating in a very powerful yet authentic way. I mean, this is sort of the meat and the threads that runs through all of this, if you ask me.
100%. Absolutely. And I think also part of it is, consumers have become so much savvier. I don't know if I can, drop an S word on the podcast, but
Please do.
they don't fall for, they don't fall for the bullshit, like they
Yeah.
can really see through it very easily now. And I think that's also where the authenticity piece comes in. Like, I mean, one of the better examples I can think of is when Pepsi tried to capitalize on like the protests in, 2017. But the whole thing was very tone deaf, because like Pepsi, like not everything has to be political. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's so inauthentic. Like, people really just saw through the whole thing.
Yeah.
The commercial that I'm talking about with, I think it was Kendall Jenner, who
Yes.
opens a Pepsi in front of a police line. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was just ridiculous. And they got a lot of blowback for it. So I think it's really like, read the room, understand your place in the marketing advertising world, and and stay true to what you are. Like, you're selling soda, you're not bringing world peace to a tumultuous time. So yeah.
That is
sorry,
a very
Pepsi.
Sorry,
you're
Pepsi.
Great, but that was bad for you to do.
I love to drink it, but I didn't like that ad. It was really obnoxious, but in any event.
I mean, like Peloton did it too. Peloton got a lot of flack for that ad where like the skinny, pretty wife is like, I don't know if I can do it, and it really kind of felt really inauthentic, especially when so many people with Pelotons are like getting them to lose weight, and like, that it is actually something that is hard to do. And it's, I think something you and I have been talking about a lot now, that for brands to figure out when they've made these missteps and apologize, or I don't even want to say apologize. Sometimes apologize isn't the right word. I want to say acknowledge their missteps, and understand that like sometimes what they think is a good idea in the room doesn't, like, ends up being tone deaf in the wider world. And, it's tricky now. Like, we've spoken offline a little about the danger of cancel culture. And, again, part of what happens in the public sphere, just like individuals, humans, non-brands, everyone makes mistakes. Brands are definitely going to make mistakes also. Like, no one is perfect all the time and knows how to navigate everything through life. And I think it's really, a combination of giving yourself the grace as a brand to take a step back and like not panic when you make a mistake, because I think also that kind of like panic crisis communication can sometimes backfire. Like, if you don't take a beat to really sit and think about what it is that's happening, and again, it comes down to being authentic and being thoughtful and really a good listener. I mean, really, right? Doesn't everyone want to feel like, oh, my brand is listening? Whether it's like, you made me wait on hold with customer service for too long, or my package arrived all ripped up, or you were totally tone deaf about the state of the world right now. I think whatever it is, the listening, like, I think brands have to have more grace about being better listeners. And, and I think also some of it falls on us as consumers. Like, we have to have a little more grace for the people who fuck up, right? Like, that's part of it too. Like,
yes. Well, you and I, we've had a lot of offline conversation about the call out and cancel culture that's going on right now, and especially online. And some of it can be quite toxic, and it's not moving the conversation forward to blame and shame and bully people into seeing things your way or
Mhm.
realizing how they made a mistake in the first place. These efforts, I think, can go a little too far. But what kind of advice would you give to someone who is witnessing that and very afraid of promoting themselves and stepping into a more visible role because they're afraid of what if they make a mistake? I mean, what kind of advice would you give to that person?
That is a great question. And my advice would be, I think fear is never a good reason to not do something. So I would say to push through the fear of, you know, imperfection and to just keep doing and growing and learning. And then I also think, like, if you're on the, sometimes I think, especially as like solo business owners. I know the term like solopreneur now, but I think some of us as solopreneurs get really in our own heads. Like we don't have ideas to bounce off of, or we don't have a team to bounce ideas off of, as much as like a bigger company would. And I think group think is just really important. And whether it's like running it by your best friend or a partner or a good, Instagram friend that you might have just met. Like if you're wanting to touch maybe a controversial subject or talk about something in a certain way, I think often communication is so nuanced because in the real world you need body language and all these nonverbal cues like your tone and like the level of your voice and all of these things add to how you're communicating with people. When you're only getting to communicate with words, people are going to interpret, they're going to see and interpret different things in those words. And so, two things. One, you have to learn how to be a really good communicator, right? You have to learn how to use your words carefully and wisely and be very thoughtful about the how you are crafting your messaging. And I also think in that regard, if you're touching on a subject that, you feel compelled to talk about, you feel like it's right to talk about for your business, but you're not totally sure if it comes off appropriately, share it before you post it with people. Like share
Yeah,
it with your inner circle or your team to get a better, it's like taking the temperature a little bit.
sure.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes we're too in our own heads to be able to think about that. Like
Yes.
we can't see the forest for the trees,
Yes. Like different
lost in the
perspectives.
woods.
Exactly. Okay, like we're 2 days post George Floyd verdict while we're having this conversation. And you and I have both been witnessing a lot of toxic conversation or conversation where people are being called out for being racist or appropriating culture that isn't their own, and I guess I want to say blind to their own white privilege. And
Mhm.
we've been witnessing this, and how the conversation it can be scary. It can be fascinating to look at, kind of like a car accident. Also, extremely educational. I personally think that I haven't sat back and listened more and said less ever in my life because I feel like I have so much to learn.
I
I
am 100% with you. There is a lot for us to learn there.
We're really in the midst of a cultural revolution, and we're going to be looking back at this like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and look at this time period and how it affected our communications and how we show up and how we do business, and really go, oh, wow, that was crazy. And I think it's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better, at least politically. That's my
As most things do.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
wish I didn't feel that way, but I do feel a sense of, dread and excitement, because I feel like the creation of all great new ways and new orders requires the destruction of something that existed. You have to destroy something in order to create something new. I really do see it that way. So for me, it's very exciting to witness.
It is, but I'll also say this. I think a big misconception about being a brand, being a business. I mean, a business and a brand are really interchangeable at this point. If your business doesn't have a brand, you're in a lot of trouble. But I think a big misconception is that you have to address all of these things, right? Like that, oh, it's happening, we can't ignore it. But I don't agree with that. I mean, not to ignore it, or maybe you deal with it internally, like you make sure you're having conversations within the workplace or facilitating a safe space for people. I mean, I think that's important. Like just being a safe space. I don't think enough work environments are safe spaces. At least the corporate ones that I have worked in have been incredibly toxic on a lot of different levels,
Yeah.
which that's a whole other conversation. But this misconception that like for example, Pepsi didn't have to talk about the protests. Like people still probably would have been drinking soda whether or not they put that out. Or I'm trying to think of another brand that did, but you it's, I think increasingly now people expect their brands to stand for something. And I think there's a time and place when they can stand up. Like, for instance, what's going on in Georgia with the voting rates is appalling. And yes, the Georgia businesses and other corporations should 100% stand up. Like, that's the time. Like, okay, you see your opening, take it. But I think that is where the authenticity piece comes in too. Like, okay, maybe it doesn't make sense for our business to get involved in national politics, but when it impacts us and our lives and the lives of our employees, we are 100% going to say something. Maybe it doesn't make sense for our business to get involved in, what is happening here or there, but I mean, I guess it's really to know when is a good time to jump in and when is not. And that's the hard thing to know. I mean, really, you need a good communications manager on your team to help you, navigate that. But I do think that's a big misconception that brands have to be at the forefront of every piece of current events.
Well, let me just ask you then, are you saying
Yeah.
that a person who's about ready to stick their toe in the water and enter a more public realm by speaking out or being more visible about who they are and what they do in the world using social media platforms, for example,
Mhm.
you're saying that they shouldn't necessarily take a stand, that that's not something that they absolutely have to do?
Correct.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. That's why I've shut up and listened,
Mhm.
because I have so
Yeah.
much to learn.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think you don't have to post, but let's say you as a brand are liking other people's posts where they're saying really poignant things. People notice that too, right? Like they'll notice that you're there and you're listening and you're liking and you're noticing. You don't have to be the one speaking. You can just be there. And, I think people notice that too.
Well, that really takes the pressure off. Thank you.
Mhm. You're welcome. You're
And I want
welcome,
to,
everyone.
yeah, everyone can thank you. I want to sort of circle back to something you said about Peloton because I was watching, I think, CNN the other night. I'm not sure. I was
Mhm.
watching some sort of television with ads, and it's usually something like CNN. And there was a competitor. And basically, what they did was they showed a Peloton advertisement or something that would look like a Peloton advertisement with the perfectly beautiful body, beautifully dressed on the Peloton bike. And they basically said, real life is not like this. And then they showed the person who's like wearing the shabby t-shirt and the leggings and their hair's a mess and they're hopping on the bike and they don't even really want to hop on the bike. And, like it's hard work, but it's worth it at the end of the day. And they basically, the messaging was there are alternatives and it doesn't all look like Peloton. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. It's a great ad if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I think that's like they know their audience, right? Like they know who they're going after. They're going after the people who are intimidated to buy a Peloton because they feel like it's only for the people in Lululemon and perfect hair and never
Right.
sweat on the bike,
Yeah.
and they know their audience. I mean, which we could have a whole separate conversation about branding and knowing your audience, knowing who you're talking to. I think that's a big issue too. I think most people really don't understand who their audience is, but that's a horse of a whole different color.
Yeah. Well, we'll save
So
that one for another day. You'll come back and we'll talk about that quite publicly. But in the meantime, I want to
I
move on
would
to
love
another
that.
topic. Yeah, because it's a really super important one that I want to say, I don't want to say struggle with. I used to really struggle with it. And now I'm just very aware of it and always addressing it in my communications. It's super, super important to know who you're speaking to when you speak so that you can be sure about how your message will be received.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, a lot of the times too, when people are just starting a new business, they don't have the data yet, let's say, to know that. And you start by making assumptions and then you fill in when you have the data. I mean, that's really, a lot of it is trial and error, and it's just being out in the world and failing a lot and then learning from each failure. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
that's
And market
marketing 101.
research, right? And market
Yeah,
research, right?
exactly.
It's so interesting because my clients will come to me and I'll start talking to them about that concept. And to them, it feels so basic. They almost want to dismiss it and jump to the next step. And I was like that when I first started studying marketing and putting it into practice for myself. I was like, oh, come on. I've done the ideal client exercise so many times. I cannot do it again. And I will give that exercise or a similar one to the people that I consult with. And they look at me like, really? What am I, in high school again? But it is so important. It is so important.
Absolutely. 100%. As usual, we agree.
As usual, we agree. Okay, so let's skip to another topic, which is why, because let's talk about why it's important to be authentic in your communications.
Well, I think it comes back to that idea that people can really see through the bullshit now. And
Yeah.
I think, their radars are up. I think they're getting very savvy. Like for a long time, banner ads and click ads worked really well. And now everyone just ignores them. People are getting really good at tuning things out. And if you're not saying something of value to them or not making an authentic connection with them, not having them read something and be like, oh, like I see myself in this. Or like, oh yeah, like this could be me. They're probably not going to open their wallet for you. So,
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to, like the psychology of human behavior and what humans are driven by in terms of, or motivated by in terms of making purchasing decisions.
Okay. So if I'm new to the whole marketing piece,
Yes.
right? How do I choose what parts of myself to show? How do I choose what to be authentic about?
Well, the way that I do it with my clients is we go after we've done the whole branding exercise and really get to the core of who you are as a brand. So the way that I explain it is that your brand is essentially, you're building a house, and your brand, the core of your brand is the foundation of the house. And everything else that you're doing, the marketing, the advertising, sales, is what gets built up on top of that foundation. And once you know what that foundation is, you can build out pillars, pillars of content or brand pillars that really are these. I mean, I also call them buckets. They're buckets. A lot of my clients enjoy calling them buckets, but you have a limited amount of buckets. What is going in those buckets? And really, those buckets are bigger topics, like what you stand for, what you want to talk about, what you're an expert in, and then you build out messaging from there based on those buckets. And, some people find it really easy to do themselves. A lot of people end up coming to me because they need help doing that. But, I actually give a lot of tips on this on my Instagram account, Hilary Young Creative. And I'm always trying to help educate people about not only branding, but then once you have this brand, how do you put a strategy in place to support the heart of what you've just built?
Exactly. Oh, I love that so very much. And a point that I want to make, tell me if you disagree. I bet you won't, but feel free to do if you do it. Feel free to disagree if you disagree. But it's not like you create these buckets once and then you're done. It's an ever growing, evolving, changing landscape because that's how we are as humans.
Absolutely. I usually recommend that a strategy should be revisited at least once a year. I mean, maybe twice a year if you're very ambitious, but I think a new strategy needs to be put, you set new goals. Maybe your goals have changed as a business, as a brand, as a person, as an entity. And really it should be re-examined and tweaked accordingly at least once a year.
Well, that's reassuring because I'm revisiting mine like every quarter, pretty much.
Wow, you're amazing. I can't even keep up with that. That's wonderful. That's so good.
Yeah, you might say I'm a little mercurial, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. So, okay, so then I have another topic that I wanted to discuss with you, which is what are the misconceptions that you see your clients have around what it means to be authentic in their marketing and their messaging?
Well, I think it's this idea that they have to be part of every conversation or share every part of their lives. I mean, especially with the solopreneurs, and if they're building a personal brand, it can be really hard for them to figure out like, do I show my kids? Do I show my family? Like, how much do I show? And really, it's a personal preference. It really depends on what you're comfortable showing or not showing. But I think you can totally be in control of what you're building and still be authentic at the same time. So you can still have a sense of privacy and still come off as authentic. And it really has to do with what you're talking about. So, let's say I don't post pictures of my two little girls in every post that I'm putting up there, but I do talk about like the struggles of being a working mom a lot, like, and I'm honest about it. Like it is damn hard. I think this idea of just not glossing over things, that when you do talk about them, you are honest and vulnerable, or showing vulnerability in what you're talking about. I think that's the best way to break through that misconception about branding.
I love that. I love having the sense of privacy and feeling like you don't have to show absolutely everything in your life. That's a really important takeaway. I don't show absolutely everything. I don't share when I've had an argument with my mother, for example. I don't talk about
Yeah.
that. For example, right? Like I remember I had this oh my goodness, without getting too personal or too weird. I had a doctor's appointment and I said, I have this thing, right? And the doctor said to me, oh, it's a blah, blah, blah. I said, well, I've never heard of that before. And she said to me, it's not exactly dinner table conversation. And I think that's a really great example of how you can have personal issues that
Mhm.
are not appropriate to share.
Totally. And again, when you're a personal brand, you create those same buckets for yourself, right? So, maybe you're a female, you're a woman who runs your own business, and you love talking about leadership and how the challenges that you faced along the way, and how to empower women, and for me it's being a working mom, and so there are ways to integrate your personal life into a personal brand without totally giving everything away, and still you'll find that people will open up to you and feel like they know you and relate to you and connect with you because of what you're sharing. I mean, and again, it has to seem like what you're sharing is coming from the heart, and it rings true to, that some other woman business owner out there or working mom is going to read this and connect with it and see some of herself in it. And I think that's really the key. That's the authentic piece, that, if they can see some of themselves in your life, they're more drawn to it.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. Hilary, I'm so glad that you took the time to speak with me today for the podcast. And if people are curious about finding out more about your work and more about you, how can they contact you?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. And people can find me online on my website, hilaryyoungcreative.com. I have a monthly newsletter that goes out all about content and branding tips. So if you're in the market for those, you can go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. And also, I give different but similar tips on Instagram as well, which is at Hilary Young Creative. And no matter where I see you, I would love to see you. Come show up, say hi, DM me, let me know what you thought about this podcast, and start the conversation.
Super exciting. I can't wait. And I can't wait to follow you even more. And I'm just so happy that we met. And it was great talking with you today. So thanks. Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked what you just heard, I'd really appreciate it if you would go on to Apple Podcasts and leave a review and rate the podcast. When you do this, it helps make sure that other people who might benefit from this message will find the podcast and hear it. Also, feel free to tell a friend, share it with someone who may also need to hear this message. And you can also follow me on Instagram at I am Jennifer B. Gardner. Feel free to connect with me there. You can always send me a DM if you have a question or you'd like to chat. And if you're looking for information on how to automate how you can get leads for your business and you're feeling sort of overwhelmed by the whole online marketing thing, go to romehowell.com/my strategy and download a free resource I created that will show you my strategy for growing your business using a very simple approach involving email, video, social media, and a simple automated sales funnel. I'll drop the link in the show notes, but you can go to www.romehowell.com/my strategy. I will see you next week. Take care.